This is WRAL News, your #1 source for local news.
All eyes on phase 1 of the plans to reopen North Carolina. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Deborah Morgan.
And I'm Gerald Owens. The specifics of the governor's plan unveiled in the past 2 hours.
This half hour, we have new reaction and analysis to the governor's announcement.
We also have a town hall with local mayors from Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. But first, the specifics announced today. Phase 1 officially begins at 5 p.m. Friday. Important takeaways start with what the state is calling the 3 W's. Wear a cloth face covering when you go out. Wash your hands or use hand sanitizer, and wait at least 6 feet away from the nearest person when out to avoid close contact. Now, here are just some of the specifics. Stores are allowed to reopen, but only at 50% capacity. The new order removes the terms essential and non-essential from businesses. They will be expected to clean regularly.
Gatherings are still limited to 10 people. Restaurant dining rooms remain closed, meaning they can offer pickup and delivery. And churches will be allowed to hold services, but only outdoors and as long as people follow social distancing orders. The governor stressed opening the gates all at once would be harmful in the long run.
Removing them all at once would cause a surge in new cases, more people in the hospital, and more North Carolinians dying. We have to keep taking precautions to keep people safe.
Now, ahead of the governor's update today, competing protests in downtown Raleigh on both sides of the reopening debate. Protesters holding signs and flags urged the governor to reopen sooner. Healthcare workers also showed up to counter-protest against the reopen group. They say we need more testing before reopening begins.
The number of tests continue to rise here in the state of North Carolina. I'm Mark Boyle in the Live Center tonight, watching the metrics that the state is also watching as it continues to move towards that reopening process. Laboratory confirmed cases. Here are the latest numbers tonight for you. The dotted blue dark line, that is the number everyone's watching as it trends down, keeping in mind the number of tests continue to rise. Positive test results coming into the state laboratory testing positive. Of all of the tests, 7% testing positive, just a little up from yesterday. Again, though, that dark blue dotted line is on the downward trend. Hospitalizations here this evening, finally 534 people testing positive and in the hospital tonight with COVID-19. This one is still going up. However, Dr. Mandy Cohen says this is considered leveling to the state as of right now. But again, these numbers are something they're watching. If they get out of control, the governor says he could dial things back. Back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Part of phase 1 also allows parks and trails to reopen. Groups who exercise together would be limited to 10 and social distancing. WRAL's Amanda Lamb has more reaction from a local trainer.
Do you think people will take advantage of it, but also follow the rules because they want to be able to do it?
They do, yeah, and I think they're more than happy to follow those rules, just as long as they can get back out here and get their with their group of people and exercise and have a good time. They're more than happy to do that.
Triangle mayors are also taking steps forward.
Today, David Crabtree had the chance to talk with Mayors Pam Hemminger of Chapel Hill, Steve Schewel of Durham, and Marianne BALDWIN of Raleigh about the steps being taken to keep locals safe while getting the economy moving again.
First off, I want to thank each of you again for taking time out of your schedule to do this. People enjoy hearing from you, what's happening in your communities. So let's begin with that. What's going on there now? Each of your communities are specific with hospitals, small businesses, large businesses. We'll start with Mayor Hemminger, then Mayor BALDWIN, and Mayor Schewel. So Pam?
So people here are really respecting the protocols we put out there. We're seeing a lot more people wearing face coverings. We're seeing the social distancing, physical distancing continuing. People are getting outside more. The weather has been nicer. People are doing more outside activities, but we're really seeing respectfulness in the stores and things that are going as we're preparing for opening up to phase 1, which will be smaller stores. We're still encouraging people that social distancing, washing your hands, face coverings are best practices and only going out if you need it. But we want to see people being able to have businesses survive. So we're trying to find that balance. And that's the word people are using. One of the things I do love, though, is we're seeing parades and signs put out. People are encouraging and applauding our healthcare heroes out there, the people that are involved in the Food Network distribution. We see a lot of good community giving. And today is Giving Tuesday, everybody. So find an organization and participate.
During our newscast at times, I watch people in Dix Park not necessarily social distancing. How much does that bother you?
We have had issues with some of our parks, but we've also had staff there, not police, but staff, reminding people of the rules. We have put up signage stating what the rules are. You know, this is really about people policing themselves and governing themselves. And we have to trust that they're going to want to do the right thing. We don't want to close down our parks. Obviously, even with this new order from Governor Cooper, if phase one parks would all reopen, that means state parks. But our parks have been open, they've been utilized, and we just continue to ask people, please obey the rules, please social distance. I mean, this picture of the sunflowers was taken before we even knew what the term social distancing was. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it makes me happy to see people out there enjoying our parks, getting fresh air and sunshine. But we need that now more than ever. So, you know, just asking people, please be considerate of others.
Mayor Schewel, how are things in Durham?
Well, I think that Pam and Marianne have done a good job of describing what I think is going on in our region, which is we're very lucky. We have a lot of folks who are doing the right thing, who are complying with the guidelines around social distancing and face covering. People are getting outside. We've been lucky, haven't we, that we have the most amazing spring that I can ever remember. And people are exercising, but I think by and large, really observing the social distancing rules. One of the good things, David, is that our rate of infection is really coming down here in Durham and across North Carolina. I just saw that this last week, our rate of infection has been less than 2% per day increase. And so that's a doubling period of probably every 50 days if we can keep that up. And so I think that we're really seeing a lot of compliance, and because of that compliance, a lot of results, which gives me hope that we can begin to slowly and safely reopen our businesses and the other things that we want to reopen inside our community, our places of worship and those kinds of things.
Well, with that in mind, phase one allows retail and non-essential stores to reopen with social distancing guidelines. Mm-hmm. Local governments have taken steps even more strict than state regulations. Mayor Schewel, Durham has often been a leader in that. Could you see a scenario in which your communities take steps to keep retail and non-essential stores closed, even with the state implementing phase one?
Let's put it like this. The governor has made it clear that his order is the floor, and that if localities feel that they need something more stringent requirements, especially urban localities where we have denser populations, that he's supportive of that. So we'll be looking at what the governor is doing and trying to figure out what requirements we do need to keep in place that may not be in the governor's order.
If we think there's a rise or a problem where we're putting people at risk, I can see us stepping in and having to make some changes. We really do count on the statistics, which are people's lives, to help us inform how to keep people safer. So we looked at that. Our Orange Leaders Group talked about, the governor's orders, how we work with that, how we make it less confusing for people. But at the end of the day, we're trying to keep people safe. So if we see a rise in numbers or we have a hot spot and we still don't have enough testing or PPEs to contain it, then I can see us making some changes and having to lock back down in order to keep people safe.
We will continue to monitor the numbers. We will continue to work with our Wake County emergency services and health services departments. If we see some statistics that look alarming, we will look at how we do things. And if we have to go it alone, we will. But that has not been what we tried to do. We have all tried to work together. And so far, we've been really successful with that. And want to commend all the mayors and Wake County for being committed to working together. It's made a real difference, and also our county commissioners.
So as far as the governor's concerned, we have reached phase one. It starts 5 o'clock Friday afternoon. Coming up after the break, what happens after the pandemic is over?
It's not just the health concerns. The mayors discuss the financial toll of this pandemic and what it could mean for some big celebrations, including 4th of July. You're watching WRAL News at 7.
Coverage you'll see only on WRAL News.
Let's talk about what each of your municipalities are facing that we may have to forego this year. It could be a bond issue. It could be fireworks. It could be some type of celebration. I know going to the break, Mayor Hemminger, you were shaking your head as if to say, we've got a lot in front of us. So we'll begin with you.
It's tough. I mean, we don't even know how to predict the end of this fiscal year yet because we're not there till June 30th. And with all our revenues down, from sales tax to occupancy tax to parking revenues, we're trying to just see how we end this year. We may have to borrow out of our fund balance just to cover the remaining. We have frozen positions. We have looked at things like our 4th of July. We're going to have to pull that. It wouldn't be safe for social distancing anyway. We're looking at all those kinds of other activities that we normally do and really taking a hard dive into what can we postpone. We had a bond referendum on affordable housing, and I would hate to pull that, but we don't know how we're going to do the big projects. We will continue government services to the best extent we can, but this next fiscal year is going to be a tough one. We're hopeful to get some support from the state. We've been getting a little bit more support from the federal government with community block grant funding to help with some of these scenarios. But it's going to be a very, very different year, and we're going to have to look at it very differently. No one wants a tax increase right now. That would be horrible. So we've got to work within the constraints of what we have and do the predictions the best we can.
Mayor Baldwin.
Yeah, we are obviously faced with the same challenges. We are not hiring or filling positions. We are cutting back contracts, non-essential contracts. We have already issued a stay against any travel, conferences, obviously. And, we've asked all our department heads to please come up with a list of things that we can cut. We're facing a $20 to $30 million shortfall. And that's our reality. So one of the things I think that is fortunate is that I did serve on the city council in 2007 to 2017 and governed through the Great Recession. I thought that would be the only Great Recession I would ever have to govern through. And unfortunately, no, we're back to where we were. And, the experience from that governance, I think, has prepared me to make these hard decisions and help guide our council. And also our city manager was in Charlotte at the time of the recession and helped guide Charlotte through that. So I feel that with our staff and team, we're in really good hands. Like all of you, we've talked about, hey, probably not going to be a July 4th celebration this year. These are the things we're going to have to do. But we are also, while we basically put off a parks bond, we are planning to continue with our housing affordability bond. It's received a lot of support. We are also trying to ensure that we don't have to raise taxes. That's our goal. But if we do a bond, it would cost the average taxpayer under $24 in additional taxes. We feel that people will want to help those in need, and that's not asking for too much.
Mayor Schewel, if I didn't know what my salary was going to be in the coming year, I couldn't put together my own family budget. How in the world do you put together a budget in Durham when you don't know how much money you're going to have?
Yep.
Well, we are fortunate that we have a really great city staff. They're working to look at what the predicted revenue is, especially on the sales tax side, where we're all taking a just tremendous hit. We feel like our budget whole. We went from a balanced budget 6 weeks ago to a $12 million budget hole right now that we're going to have to fill. We're going to do it without raising taxes. We want to keep all of our employees employed. So it's going to be very difficult. We're going to have to make some really hard choices, David, but it has to be done. But it's not just about the budget. You mentioned we're not going to be able to have the Festival of the on July 4th. Maybe later in the year we'll be able to do it, but certainly not on July 4th, which is a landmark event here every year. I love to throw out the first pitch at the Bulls. I threw a strike last year. I want to just be clear with everybody about that. But we won't be having an opening day. We haven't had opening day at the Bulls. And these are very hard things for our community. It's not just about the budget. It's also about the things that we miss that are such wonderful community events that pull us together.
Yeah, we're missing so much. David had quite the conversation with them, perhaps not as obvious in that talk back there. These three mayors do communicate regularly about how to handle this and move forward. That's right.
One of the tasks we are expecting to learn more about in Durham is the creation of a recovery and renewal task force. That group is made up of local business owners and community leaders tasked with reopening the Bull City. We're back with more reaction to today's news from the State Restaurant and Lodging Association. That's coming up next.
With this pandemic, restaurants are in a really bad situation. No opening of dining rooms and restricted to takeout and delivery only still with phase 1 of the easing of restrictions.
Steve Tannhauser is the board chair of the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association and the owner of Angus Barn in Raleigh. He joins us live to respond to today's news. Steve, thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to see you guys.
Steve, some restaurants aren't as conducive to takeout and delivery. It's some income, but it's not nearly normal for a lot of restaurants, yours included, I imagine. Tell us, what's the percentage of your restaurant's business that is lost during this pandemic so we can understand what the next 2 weeks will look like for many, many restaurants?
It is pretty brutal, Gerald. For the Angus Barn, we've lost about 92% of our typical revenue during the days and weeks. 9 to 10% is made up with the takeout.
Steve, today the chamber called for a revised plan which would have also allowed the restaurants to reopen in phase 1. Do you think that's a good idea?
We are all about safety. We're all about making sure that when the governor allows our customers to come back, that we will serve them safe. But my hope is that at some point the governor may allow us to at least do outdoor dining in the interim, like he's doing with the churches, letting them proceed with outdoor services. But I do think that we are really good at serving our customers safely, and we have been working with DHHS and other statewide partners to make sure we have a program for all of our restaurants to follow that will serve safely for all of our customers.
And Steve, you've been raising money. People have been raising money throughout this pandemic for restaurant employees, for restaurants themselves, so they can at least make up some of what you've lost. Talk about that experience and the outpouring of support you've seen from the public.
It just warms my heart and it validates the fact that especially our Triangle residents are so generous and helpful. On March 17th, they turned out the lights on restaurants. Over 500,000 restaurant people, restaurant workers in our state, over 19,000 restaurants were shut down virtually. And thanks to you guys and people like the Ashley Christensens of the world, and everybody came together along with the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association to form this North Carolina Restaurant Relief Fund. And the outpouring has been amazing, not just from thousands and thousands of individuals, but from corporate sponsors and just people all over the Triangle and the state.
It's been a great outpouring of support for restaurants, certainly. Steve Tannhauser with the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association. Thank you so much for your time joining us on FaceTime.
Thank you, Steve.
It is my pleasure.
Thank you, Steve. Well, and you heard the Chapel Hill's mayor mention earlier, today is Giving Tuesday. You have plenty of ways to give back to organizations in our area. WRAL is here to help, and we are proud to report another $266,000 has been distributed to 36 nonprofits in our area from our latest fundraising effort for the United Way Emergency Response Relief Fund. In all, more than $1 million has been raised for the fund, but the United Way tells us requests from groups is now more than $5 million.
That does it for us at 7 o'clock on WRAL.
Good night.